Politically, I don't know how Donald Trump does it, some kind of political jujitsu to figure the Democrats out enough to get them to defend, well, Venezuelan gang members, among other people. And I thought I'd talk about the fact that a federal appeals court has now told the president he can't use the 1798 Alien Enemies Act to get these Venezuelan gang members out of the country. And Susham M joins me now, former law professor and immigration attorney at the Modi law firm. Mr. Modi, welcome to the program. How are you?
Hey, good, Lars. Honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm glad to have you on because, look, I tell my audience all the time I'm not an attorney, and I know just a tiny little bit, but I want to know from you, is the federal appeals court, do you think, right that this act, I know it was passed a couple of hundred years ago, fine, that it does not apply in cases like this? Or are they going to end up just being one of those federal appeals courts, and there are a bunch of them, that are going to get overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court at some point?
I think the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals is likely right. I mean, if we look just historically, both at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals has been more conservative than other circuits, like the Ninth Circuit, for example. And even the district court judge that initially ruled that the Alien Enemies Act was not properly used was actually a Trump appointee. So these are, in some ways, conservative judges. And the reason that they found that it's illegally used is just like you mentioned, Lars. It's a very old law. It's about over 200 years old in 1798, and it's only been used 3 times historically during wars. So the War of 1812, World War I, and World War II. And that's what the Fifth Circuit actually looked at. That's what we look at is historically on cases and how it's been used before to see if it can be applied here.
Well, let me sharpen up that question a little bit, and that has to do with this. The law talks about a predatory incursion or an invasion. Now, those are two different things. You say, well, invasion, that would be like during wartime. But a predatory incursion, it seems, and I know that there are times where generic English words mean one thing to all the rest of us and something else when you get in front of the lawyers and the courts, but wouldn't you think that you'd be able to say this stuff that Tren de Aragua was up to, among others, in the United States was a predatory incursion? They came in and they seemingly, they went to town. I mean, they took over apartment blocks. They took over parts of towns. They began doing all these illegal activities. Doesn't that sound generically like a predatory incursion?
Well, I would say 2 things about that. One, when it was made, the predatory incursion segment, that was actually analyzed by the Fifth Circuit, that exact term in a subheading. And what the Fifth Circuit said is that the way they used predatory incursion back in the 1700s, 1800s, is it was by military incursions, physical incursions, groups that were intertwined with the government abroad. Here, they didn't find any of the evidence to support that it was actually the Venezuelan government trying to have the gangs, have a predatory incursion here. It's that the gangs were separate than the government itself. And so that's what the Fifth Circuit was analyzing in that topic. Secondly, and the Fifth Circuit really didn't get into this because they analyzed it under exactly what you're mentioning, the predatory incursion part. But even if we look at the plain language of the statute, it states that the predatory incursion has to be by a government. So we don't have that here. This is a private group of gangs. So that's really, I think, a next level analysis that the next courts may look at as well.
Okay, and by the way, I do know at least this, and correct me if I'm wrong, now that they've made a trial court level, finding on this, what they'll depend on going forward is everything that's already in the record. So can the administration bring in new things like saying, we think that a lot of this by Tren de Aragua was perhaps at the direction of or to benefit people like Maduro in Venezuela? Can they make that case, or are they allowed to bring in new elements at this point?
Excellent question. Generally, no. They cannot bring in new evidence, except there is an exception for, like, those types of evidence that are, like, judicially public or acceptable. So, like, there's a small exception, as many laws have exceptions, But very generally speaking, like if you think of like expert witnesses or, other evidence that's not generally public that's available, they can't submit that evidence. But if it's just a judicial notice, then there may be a small exception for that. But generally, no, you can't include new evidence.
Which means that even if they could prove that Maduro encouraged Tren de Aragua, because I don't know a lot about his relationship with the gangs that are running the country, because he seems like just another gang leader to me in the way that he runs Venezuela. That you can't say, we can make the case there's a nexus between Maduro and Tren de Aragua, and they're doing this at his bidding. If they could do that,
yeah.
could they put that in front of the higher courts?
Not likely in terms of expert witnesses, but if there's something like let's say the Venezuelan government, this is very hypothetical or speculative, but, it's taken over by the gangs, and that there's like a war and it's like a judicial notice that it's been done. Maybe something like that could put in. But expert witnesses, et cetera, they had their chance during the trial opportunity, the government did, to include that evidence.
Why do you think they didn't?
I don't think it really exists. I think it's a private gang, and there are a lot of countries with gangs, corruption and gangs, like Mexico. We talk about other Central American countries.
Mr. Modi, I was thinking about Mexico itself. I mean, do you think the Mexican government does anything without realizing how the cartels are going to react? In fact, they just had a fist fight in their parliament the other day because there were members saying we ought to bring the United States in and help clean up this gang problem. And then, of course, it sounds like the bought and paid for members of the parliament who answered to the cartels said, no, we're not going to bring them in. We don't want that to happen. It seems as though Mexico is a country where anybody who's in charge in that country in political office has to take into account what the cartels are going to think of what they're doing, right?
Well, I think there is a lot of corruption. I agree with you. There's a lot of corruption in other countries with gang involvement. But there's a distinction, I think, between corruption in those gangs and then actually being a part of the nation or government in like a full military scale invasion, which is what the law was looking at with the Alien Enemies Act. And that's the historical jurisprudence of it, too, the three times that it's been used before.
So it's going to get appealed, and the Supreme Court might shoot down President Trump as well?
Yeah, that could be one option. So one of two things could occur. One, the government could ask for an en banc review, which is all the judges in the Fifth Circuit could review it. That could be one option. We're just not sure if they're going to do that. And then the second option is exactly as you mentioned. It's that they could just go to the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court's not in session right now. They don't go back into session until the first Monday of October. And then they have their own docket. And so we may not get a decision real soon on it. There's other things that are priorities as well, including the tariff issue that the Supreme Court's looking at. But I think it's likely the Supreme Court's going to make a decision on the merits. And just to clarify, the Supreme Court did look at this issue, but just in terms of habeas, like the writ of habeas from Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution to challenge your detainment. And they ruled on that, but they never ruled on the merits. They sent it back down for the lower courts to make their decisions first so they can look at those before they make a decision on the merits. So
does that mean at some point,
it's likely.
I'm sorry, but I'm running up against the clock, but does that mean that at some point Trump may have to haul all these jokers back from El Salvador and put them back in the United States?
That's an excellent question. So as you know, Mr. Abrego Garcia was sent back. His case was special, though, because he actually had a trial. He won what's called withholding of removal that showed he was more likely than not going to be tortured if he was returned. So that was one reason why he was required to come back. And then, of course, there's a district court order on that. But for the other individuals, you're exactly correct. That could be another issue to look into, because if the law was not properly used to remove them in the first place. And remember, I think over 75% of those individuals, the 200 people on the plane, they actually had no criminal convictions.
The Lars Larson Show.